My brother destroyed my other brother by stealing his fiancée, now that he got cheated on the same way he's begging for forgiveness. But the karma is perfect, and our answer left him speechless. I'm 22 years old, work in graphic design from home, and honestly, I need to write this down because what happened in my family like 2 years ago still has me processing everything. Like, there are days when I wake up and think, did all of this really happen? The thing is, I grew up in a family that basically had one commandment carved in stone. Family loyalty is the most important thing. You know, that whole blood is thicker than water phrase and all that stuff. My parents repeated it to us constantly, especially my mom, who practically made it her religion. There were 4 of us kids. Jordan, the oldest, at 29 now, then Madison at 26, Blake at 25, and me being the baby of the family. And I guess for a long time we really believed in that whole unconditional loyalty between us thing. Jordan was always the golden child. You know? The guy was super charismatic, had that magnetic personality that made everyone adore him, got jobs easily, girls chased after him, and my parents basically thought he walked on water. Blake was totally different, quieter, more thoughtful, the kind of person who earned things through real effort, not through charm. He worked in construction, got up at 5 in the morning every day, saved every penny, and never asked anyone for anything. Madison was the one who kept everyone grounded, super practical and straightforward, worked in human resources, and was always the mediator when problems came up. I was like everyone's confidant. I guess, the little sister everyone trusted with their secrets. And believe me when I say, I now wish I hadn't known so much about what was coming. Everything started to change when Blake met Tiffany like 5 years ago. They met at work. She was the sister of one of his coworkers, and Blake fell head over heels for her from the start. She was pretty. Yeah, but I don't know. There was always something about her that made me uncomfortable, though I could never identify exactly what it was. She had like this way of being super sweet with everyone, but it felt kind of fake. You know what I mean? But Blake was happy. Really happy. And after 2 years of dating, he proposed to her. I remember he did this whole elaborate plan, took her to the place where they had their first date, had photos of them everywhere, and when she said yes, my brother literally cried with happiness. It was the first engagement in our family. I mean, Madison and Jordan had never had long, serious relationships, and my parents were super excited. The wedding was planned for a year later, and Tiffany practically moved into our family during that time. She came to all the family dinners, spent entire weekends at my parents' house, and we all treated her like she was already officially part of the family. Jordan was around the house a lot in those days too, because he had left his apartment to save money while looking for a better job. So basically they were all together all the time. And this is where things started getting weird. Though at the time I didn't fully understand what I was seeing. I started noticing that Tiffany and Jordan had like these inside jokes that nobody else understood. They laughed at things no one else caught. They looked at each other in ways that seemed too intimate to me. Like, it wasn't normal the way she touched his arm when they talked, or how he always found excuses to sit next to her at the table. Blake was working a ton during that period, like he was constantly doing overtime to pay for the wedding and the down payment on a house, so he'd come home exhausted and often fall asleep early. And while he slept, Tiffany and Jordan would stay up watching movies together, or go out shopping for wedding stuff together, and my mom thought it was adorable that Jordan was helping so much with the preparations. One day, like 6 months before the wedding, Blake came to my apartment. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was working on a freelance project when he knocked on the door. When I saw him, I knew something was wrong because he had that expression of someone who hasn't slept well in days. We sat down, and for like 20 minutes he didn't say anything, just stared at his coffee, and finally he told me, I think something's going on between Tiffany and Jordan. I literally felt like I'd been punched in the stomach because I'd been thinking the same thing too, but had convinced myself I was being paranoid. I asked him what he'd seen, and he told me he'd found them hugging on the couch at 2 in the morning when he went down for water, that Tiffany had cried and pulled away quickly, saying Jordan was consoling her because she was stressed about the wedding. Blake said technically there was nothing concrete, nothing he could point to and say, look, here's the evidence, but that his gut was screaming at him that something wasn't right. I asked him if he was going to confront them, and he was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said he was scared, that if he accused them and nothing was happening, he'd look like a crazy, paranoid, jealous person, and if something was happening, then his life was basically going to be destroyed. The thing is, you know what I mean? Blake was the type of person who had always done everything right, had never caused problems, had been the loyal and reliable brother, and the idea that Jordan, his older brother who he'd admired his whole life, could betray him like that was something he just couldn't fully process. I told him to trust his instinct, that if something felt wrong, it probably was because something was wrong, but I also understood his position. After that conversation, I started paying more attention, and believe me, what I saw made my hair stand on end. And the way Tiffany looked at Jordan when Blake wasn't watching was completely different from how she looked at Blake. With Blake, it was like affectionate in an automatic way, you know? But with Jordan, there was this intensity, this chemistry that was impossible to ignore once you saw it. Jordan wasn't any better either. The guy found any excuse to touch her, to be near her. And the worst part is, he did it in ways that technically could be explained as innocent, but clearly weren't. One day, Madison called me and told me she'd noticed it too. That she thought Blake should know, but that she didn't know how to tell him without sounding crazy. I told her Blake already suspected it, but was afraid to confront the situation. Everything exploded like 3 months before the wedding. Blake got home from work early one day. He had to pick up some tools he'd left at my parents' house, and he found Tiffany and Jordan kissing in the garage. He literally found them with their hands on each other's clothes, and when he told me the story days later, he said the first thing he thought was that he was dreaming, that his brain simply couldn't process what his eyes were seeing. He said he stood there like an idiot for I don't know how many seconds before they saw him, and when they finally noticed him, Tiffany immediately started crying and Jordan just stood there saying nothing. Blake said only one thing, "Get out of here now," and went into the house. My parents weren't there, thank God, because who knows what would have happened if they'd witnessed that scene. Tiffany tried calling Blake like 1,000 times that day, but he wasn't answering. She finally went to his apartment that night and confessed everything. They'd been having an affair for months, basically since Jordan had moved back in with my parents. She told him it started as innocent flirting, that Jordan paid attention to her in ways Blake didn't because he was so busy working, and that it just happened. When Blake told me this, I was at his apartment with him. Madison was there too, and we were both sitting on the couch listening while Blake repeated the conversation word for word in this completely monotone voice, like he was in shock. Tiffany told him she was in love with Jordan, that she was so sorry but couldn't marry him knowing she loved someone else. And the sickest part of all this is that someone else was his brother. What happened next was like watching a nuclear bomb explode in slow motion. Tiffany literally packed her bags that same night and went to live with Jordan in an apartment he'd just rented. Blake was devastated. Like, I'd never in my life seen my brother like that. He looked completely broken. Madison was furious. I was in shock. And when my parents found out the next day, it was like the world had ended. My dad, who had always been quieter and more reserved, got like I'd never seen him. He told Jordan he had 1 hour to get all his stuff out of the house and that he never wanted to see him again. My mom, on the other hand, started crying and trying to defend Jordan, saying things like, "We can't control who we fall in love with," and that Blake should understand that these things happen. The difference in my parents' reaction basically split the family in two. My dad, Madison, Blake, and I completely agreed that what Jordan had done was unforgivable, that he'd violated the fundamental principle our family supposedly was based on, that loyalty we talked so much about. My mom insisted that Jordan was her son too, that she couldn't just cut him out of her life, and that we all needed to forgive and move forward as a family. There were horrible fights for weeks, arguments that ended with people screaming and crying, and basically our family completely disintegrated. What infuriated me most, and still infuriates me to this day, is how my mom justified everything. She'd say things like, "Well, if Tiffany really loves Jordan, then maybe it was better Blake found out now than after the wedding," as if that made the betrayal less horrible. She'd say Jordan was suffering too, that the guilt was killing him, and that he needed his family's support. Can you believe it? The guy who had just destroyed his brother supposedly needed our support? Madison told my mom that if she kept defending Jordan, she was going to cut contact with her too, and I honestly thought she was just saying it. But Madison is the type who keeps her word. Jordan tried calling Blake like a week after everything exploded. He left voicemails saying he was sorry, that he never meant for this to happen, that he'd fallen in love with Tiffany and didn't know what to do. Blake played them for me one day, and I could only think about how pathetic those excuses sounded. I didn't know what to do, except not get involved with your brother's fiancée, basically. Blake never returned his calls, blocked his number, blocked Tiffany, and basically tried to move on with his life, though you could tell he was destroyed inside. He lost like 10 pounds in 2 months, stopped going out with his friends, buried himself in work, and the few moments when we talked about how he felt, all he'd say was, "I can't believe my own brother did this to me." My mom started visiting Jordan and Tiffany regularly, like 2 or 3 times a week. She'd tell us about them even though nobody asked. Like she thought if she kept us updated on their lives somehow, that would make us miss them or want to reconnect. She'd say things like, "Jordan looks so sad. He really needs you guys." Or "Tiffany is trying really hard to be part of the family. You should give her a chance." Everyone's patience was running out fast with these conversations. My dad would literally get up and leave the room every time my mom mentioned Jordan's name, and eventually he told her that if she wanted to stay married to him, then she was going to have to stop bringing Jordan into every conversation. Things got even more tense when, like 6 months after everything exploded, my mom announced that Jordan and Tiffany had gotten engaged. She said it at a family dinner. It was just my dad, Madison, Blake, her, and me. And she literally put Tiffany's engagement ring on her phone in the middle of the table like she expected everyone to be happy for them. Blake got up from the table without saying a word and left. Madison told my mom it was incredible how insensitive she was being, and I honestly couldn't even look at her. My dad told her he didn't want to know anything about the wedding, that he wasn't going to attend, and that he hoped she wouldn't either, but knew it was a lost battle. The wedding was 6 months after the engagement. Super quick, and my mom was the only person from our family who attended. She showed us photos afterwards, and I felt nauseous looking at them. Tiffany looked happy, Jordan looked happy, and there was my mom smiling in all the photos, like this was some kind of romantic, happy ending instead of the complete destruction of our family. Blake had moved to a new apartment in another part of the city by then, basically to get away from all the places that reminded him of Tiffany. Madison had accepted a job in another city, like 3 hours away, officially for the better. Professional opportunity, but we all knew she also wanted distance from this whole mess. Family dinners stopped completely. There were no more Christmases together, no Thanksgivings, no family birthdays. My dad and mom basically lived like roommates who didn't talk about certain topics. I tried to maintain some normalcy. Visited Blake regularly to make sure he was okay. Talked to Madison on the phone at least once a week, and still saw my parents, though the visits were super awkward. Blake eventually started dating someone new like a year and a half after everything happened, a girl named Sarah who worked in his office. And he looked a bit better, though. There were still days when you noticed he was carrying all that pain. Madison had a completely new life in her city. New friends, new job, and honestly seemed happier away from all this drama. My mom kept visiting Jordan and Tiffany, kept trying to convince us to forgive them, kept saying the family should be together no matter what. And then, like 6 months ago, karma finally caught up with Jordan in the most ironic and perfect way possible. Tiffany cheated on him. My mom came home one day with red eyes from crying and announced that Jordan was devastated because he'd discovered Tiffany was having an affair with some guy from her work. Apparently, they'd been seeing each other for months, and Jordan had discovered them in a similar way to how Blake had discovered them. He came home early and found text messages on Tiffany's phone. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. The guy who had destroyed his brother by stealing his fiancée was now experiencing exactly the same betrayal, and honestly, I couldn't feel even a bit of pity for him. My mom was devastated for Jordan, obviously, saying he needed his family, that he was suffering so much, that we couldn't abandon him in his darkest moment. She called me first, then called Madison, then tried to talk to Blake, trying to convince us to go see Jordan and support him. All three of us told her no. Madison was super direct and told her mom, "Jordan is experiencing exactly what he did to Blake. If you wanted us to feel sorry for him, you picked the wrong person." I told her Jordan had made his bed and now had to sleep in it, that he couldn't expect us all to run to console him when he had caused exactly this type of pain in Blake without any apparent remorse. Blake didn't even return my mom's call, simply ignored her completely. My dad told my mom that if she wanted to go console Jordan, that was her decision, but not to expect the rest of us to do it. There was another horrible fight between them where my mom accused my dad of raising his children to be cold and unforgiving, and my dad responded that he had raised us to be loyal and that Jordan had broken that loyalty in the most fundamental way possible. He said maybe this was what Jordan needed to understand the magnitude of what he'd done to Blake, though my dad doubted Jordan could really understand it even now. My mom still visits Jordan regularly, consoles him, tries to help him get over the Tiffany thing, and basically continues being his only source of family support. Jordan apparently tried reaching out to Blake through her, sending messages like, Now I understand how you felt and forgive me, but Blake wants nothing to do with him. Madison doesn't either, and neither do I. The thing is, forgiveness has to be earned. You know what I mean? And Jordan never really did the work to earn Blake's forgiveness. He never took full responsibility, never tried to make things right, just expected everyone to forgive him because months had passed or because now he was the one suffering. Blake is okay now, I guess. Or at least better than he was. Things with Sarah are getting serious. They moved in together a few months ago, and though he'll never be the same as before, at least he's building a new life. Madison is happy in her new city, has a serious relationship with someone she met there, and basically created the family she wanted away from the drama of ours. My parents are still together, but their relationship definitely isn't what it was. My mom chose Jordan over all of us in many ways, and my dad is never going to fully forgive her for that. I keep living my life, working, seeing Blake and Madison when I can, and honestly, I've already accepted that our family is never going to be what it was. Last week, my mom called me again, asking me to reconsider forgiving Jordan, saying it's been 2 years and it's time to let go of the resentment. I told her the same thing I've told her the last 20 times she's brought up this topic, that Jordan betrayed Blake in the most fundamental way possible, that he destroyed our family, and that the fact that the same thing has now been done to him doesn't make him any less guilty of what he did. I told her that if Jordan really wants forgiveness, then he needs to earn it, not just expect it because enough time has passed, or because now he also knows what it feels like to be betrayed. I don't think she'll ever understand it, honestly. For her, family loyalty means forgiving no matter what, but for the rest of us, family loyalty meant not destroying your brother in the first place, and Jordan failed that test in the most spectacular way possible. And that's enough for me, I guess.